Proliferation's, I think, a big word in the industry these days. We'll just call it a shift away from these big, exquisite satellites to more satellites doing similar missions, but aggregated across smaller ones, right? That's definitely happening in LEO. You see Starlink, Starshield, Amazon LEO, whatever Blue Origin's calling their thing. You also see a little bit of it in GEO, mostly for government applications, but you also just see a transition to smaller GEO satellites. I've heard the term proliferated GEO flown around. People also talk about cislunar, MEO, other applications in those orbits as well. So I'll touch mostly on LEO today. I'll touch on GEO as well. So the only commercially viable mode of satellite servicing right now is to dock and move other satellites. You bring a servicer, you dock with it, and you move it in a way that is valuable for a customer. There are other modes like upgrading satellites or refueling that are coming, but I would not say are commercially viable right now. And why I think that is my definition of commercially viable means you service satellites as they are right now. You do it on dependable timelines, as far as at least as the space industry is concerned. And most importantly, you do it at prices that customers can afford. And so I'll talk today mostly about fleet management and sustainment because that's where commercial applicability comes, really. I have not in a box mobility, which General Whiting talked a lot about yesterday, which is less of a commercial business case and less reliant on commercial viability. But I really want to focus on the commercial business case today. So just quickly, servicing is not new. You see Hubble being serviced. This is a photo of MEV doing their mission with the Intelsat satellite a couple years ago, and then a rendering of our satellite before a disposal mission. So quickly, fleet management and sustainment in GEO. I think the simplest way I'll explain this is you have one satellite or you have multiple satellites. They have healthy payloads, but they are running out of fuel. You go dock with it, or your servicer goes and docks with it, acts like a jetpack, keeps it in its orbital slots, removes inclination, ultimately allows it to continue doing its mission. This is a really easy business case to understand. Satellite can keep operating, keep providing value for its customers, keeps generating revenue. If you can provide that service at a fraction of the cost of that revenue, then maybe a business case closes. That one's pretty straightforward. LEO is a little bit less intuitive, and I think that's where we get the most skepticism. You can talk about deorbiting satellites as a service. So you have these large constellations. I think there is business value to having a disposal service able to be called and deorbit your dead satellites. There is also sort of more of a nebulous, harder to predict use case around boosting satellites. If you have maybe a SAR constellation that's pretty draggy, but still a valuable satellite, you might want to boost it and therefore extend its life. I'm going to focus today more on the first, which is deorbit as a service. And the primary sort of axis of value here is you can fly these satellites longer if you can deorbit them with a service rather than to deorbit them early to comply with deorbit guidelines. You can also build less redundancy into your system because you have sort of this insurance policy across your constellation. So back to the business case, what is the ROI and what's driving that? I think a lot of the objections that we get are captured here. One, folks think they design their satellites really well, and generally they do. But if you have deorbit services, you maybe don't have to put another thruster on your system to make sure you can comply with guidelines. We see this, deorbit is too expensive, and in many cases it still is. But if you can, as constellation sizes grow and as technology improves, you can spread the cost of a deorbit vehicle, you can amortize that over multiple services. Yeah, if you have a vehicle that can do one deorbit, that probably won't close a business case. But if you have an efficient vehicle that can do 5, 6, 7, 8 deorbits with a single vehicle, and that vehicle is cheap, that starts to close a business case. The other piece is that failures are unpredictable. And yeah, that's true to an extent, but as constellation sizes grow, failures are going to happen, and you can model that out pretty well. The last piece that I didn't touch on is sort of this service model. Historically, satellite programs, if a communications company buys a big satellite, they put a lot of CapEx into that years before the satellite is in orbit. If as a servicer, you can provide a service model, you're going and providing a service rather than selling them a satellite, most of that value is exchanged as you provide that service, and therefore it's not really CapEx that they have to defer or they have to wait to extract value from in many years, and that helps close a business case as well. So I'm going to go through a quick case study. This is super notional, very high level. I'm missing a bunch of assumptions. Happy to talk through any of them afterwards, but trying to just illustrate how we think about it and how we try to explain it to folks, or how we try to explain why this is valuable. So if you take an estimate that across a 300 satellite constellation costs $15 million to build, let's say each disposal costs $5 million. I don't know how much folks are spending in propellant for avoiding collisions, but let's zero that out for now. Say a 5-year satellite design life, a couple early failures upon deployment, a couple random failures along the way, and then a couple sort of wear and tear failures, say a thruster after you get a number of cycles in there. Ultimately, we assume that each satellite generates about 10 million per year in value. Again, notional, maybe these aren't right, but I think it's parameterizes it effectively. So case one is you manage this fleet without a servicer. I'm not going to walk through the whole thing, but ultimately these failures compound over time. Not compound, but they add up, right? And you have more and more failed satellites flying in your fleet as you get towards the end of the design life for each satellite. After 5 years, you've got 18, 20 satellites that are flying around in your planes that are not controllable, not predictable. Maybe you have to deorbit the whole fleet. And that's a little finger wavy, right? But you'll be launching more satellites than you would otherwise to replace those. Unless you have a servicer that comes and disposes of these satellites as they fail. Not only do you de-risk the collisions across the constellation, but you can also fly the healthy satellites for longer because there's less risk of collisions from the dead satellites, and you have more confidence that you can comply with orbital debris mitigation guidelines because you have a servicer sort of on tap. This just sort of shows you, so if you can fly more satellites for longer, you have a larger fleet, safer to replenish those constellations as well. So you see a big ROI number on the bottom. It's probably because I'm missing a bunch of costs, but I think it's still a pretty big number. If you're able to fly your satellites each for 2 years longer, if you only had planned for 5 years of design life, that's 40% more life out of those satellites. That's really the bottom line here is you can fly these satellites longer, and that doesn't even incorporate, maybe you can design these satellites cheaper as well. Works if your satellite servicing is cheap and it's available and you can provide it on dependable timelines. So I talked a lot about dock and move, and that's really what Starfish is focused on right now with our servicing vehicle. But what can you do if you can dock with a satellite reliably? And I think you've heard a lot. I think OrbitFab was up here earlier today talking about being able to dock with a satellite is the prerequisite for being able to refuel. If you can do that reliably, efficiently, affordably, you can refuel satellites, you can upgrade components. We got a nice rendering of assembling a telescope in space. I think the mind can wander with a lot of exciting possibilities. There's a lot of applications on the national security side that are unique there as well that folks can probably imagine. So I'll leave it there. Happy to take questions sort of live here with the group. And yeah, I'll stop there. Thanks.